Well, looks like I'm reviewing every film of the Disney Animated Canon. Hey everybody, and have you ever wondered how something popular and long-lasting got its foot only to see that there's barely any reason to look back on them aside seeing where it all began? Because Disney's first couple of movies are sort of that. In 1923, Walt and Roy O. Disney opened up a studio in Los Angeles and started off work with the Alice comedy short films, distributed by Winkler Pictures. Later on, they began also with The Lucky Rabbit via Universal. But in 1928, Steamboat Willie premiered with Mickey Mouse as the star, exploding in popularity, and with that, leading the studio to produce a whole range of shorts from those starring Mickey to their more experimental Silly Symphony shorts. Around 1934, the studio began work on their first animated feature-length film, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, finally releasing in December 1937 at the Carthay Circle Theatre, before getting a wider release in February 1938, to vast critical and commercial success. While animated feature-lengths were not unheard of at the time, Snow White was the first to truly get everyone's attention and fall head over heels in love with it. It wasn't the first feature-length animated film by a long shot, but it might as well have been. And with that success, led Disney to produce arguably the greatest collection of films produced by an animation studio, with their first 5 often hailed as the best of the lot. Their golden age, if you will. Now here, I'm gonna take a look at all 5 of these films to see if they really hold up to their name, and are as great as everyone says. Starting off with the Academy Award review of Walt Disney cartoons, technically considered Disney's first feature-length film, a package film of 5 Silly Symphony shorts that won the Oscar for Best Short Cartoon, released in May 1937 to help promote Snow White, which includes Flowers and Trees, 3 Little Pigs, The Tortoise and the Hare, 3 Orphan Kittens, and The Country Cousin. Aside from some unique transitions, there's no reason to check this one out today, especially if you've seen these shorts before. It later got re-released in 1966 with The Old Mill, Virgin and the Bold, The Ugly Duckling, and Lunda Paw added. Both versions were released in Japan via Laserdisc in 1985, as well as a VHS here in the UK. But again, not much to go crazy over, aside being an interesting part of animation history. Alright, no more teases this time. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the timeless classic with dazzling animation, gorgeous scenery, whimsical music. Uncanny rotoscoping, auger pacing, not really being as good as Lexi might have you think it is. Okay, I think it's safe to say that this is a Sonic 1 of animated movies. Incredible for when it came out, but when compared to what came after it, not so much. While I do respect the living daylights out of this film and still really like it, at some points I can't help but feel that this film kinda felt like a first attempt. Oh, hello. Let me explain. We begin with the evil queen asking the magic mirror who the fairest and most beautiful person in all the land is, that being Snow White. We cut to her working around the castle, bumping into the prince for no reason, and never again until the very end of the flick, and then one day, jealous of her beauty, the queen sends a huntsman to kill Snow White. He can't bring himself to do so, and lets Snow White flee deep into the woods to never return. We then get a visually striking sequence of her getting frightened and lost in the woods, and afterwards befriends woodland critters, then finding a seemingly abandoned cottage, and then clean it up. That would be simultaneously the best and worst possible way to sort out spring cleaning. We soon learn that the cottage belongs to 7 dwarfs who work at a nearby mine, now heading back home, and I had to say, the music here's great. I'm obviously not gonna play it here, but believe me when I say that 86 years later, Hi-Ho still slaps. But this is where the film's biggest flaw comes in, is when the dwarfs get back home and discover Snow White, the movie kinda stops. You know how critics whinged about the Mario movie being too fast-paced? Snow White does one better and takes 10 minutes for the dwarfs to discover Snow White, and another 7 of the dwarfs taking a bath, combined taking up 20.48% of this 83-minute film. These are time well spent and filled with charm for sure, but makes you wish they got to the next scene already. The film then resumes as the queen discovers that Snow White is still alive and that the huntsman tricked her with a pig's heart. On the bright side, he likely killed him. This leads the queen to take care of things herself, and transforms into an old hag and poisons an apple to kill Snow White. The next day, the dwarfs head off to work, and the queen pops by and poisons Snow White with the apple. The dwarfs then worry if she's in trouble on her own and head back. They're too late and chase the queen, leading her to fall off a cliff with a bulger crushing her. Caesar! The dwarfs mourn the loss of the frankly one-dimensional by today's standard princess and develop a glass coffin to preserve her beauty. A year later, the prince from the start comes to save the day with true love's kiss, breaking the curse which wakes her up, delighting everyone as Snow White and the prince live happily ever after. Don't get me wrong, the characters are lovable, the music is nice, the animation looks fantastic for 1937, and planted the seeds for their films following afterwards, but does have a bit of pacing issues. But then again, this was the first of its kind, and Disney have been used to making shorts a tenth of the film's length, so I can understand. To all in all, it's still to this day a delightful classic, but you could sometimes tell this was their first rodeo. Now for Pinocchio. We begin with Jiminy Cricket singing When You Wish Upon a Star on top of a book of Pinocchio just before introducing us to the story, and I might argue it's the greatest Disney song ever written. The fact they still use it today in their logo speaks volumes. In fact, all the songs here are great. Give It a Little Whistle, An Actor's Life for Me, and I've Got No Strings still hold up majestically. Anyhow, we begin with the homeless Jiminy sneaking into Geppetto's workshop in the middle of crafting a puppet he then calls Pinocchio, with his pet goldfish and cat Figaro accompanying the crafter, and wishes that his puppet would become a real boy. An uncannily rotoscope fairy then brings the puppet to life, making Jiminy Pinocchio's conscience, and states that he can only become a real boy depending on his actions. This bamboozles the house, and for some reason Geppetto has a gun with him at all times, and also Figaro goes up Geppetto's nightgown from down below. Let me tell you, this is the movie's calm before the storm. Geppetto then becomes filled with delight that his puppet is now alive and celebrate. A new day begins as Pinocchio heads off to school, but Jiminy overslept. Yet Pine Boy encounters honest John and Gideon, who tempt him to become the star of a traveling show. He does so, and despite Jiminy's best attempts, Pinocchio joins the con artists anyway. Pinocchio then becomes the star of a show held by Stromboli and held captive by him to never see his father again. A worried Geppetto goes out for him as Jiminy pops into the wagon to wish the puppet luck, only to find him in a cage. Jiminy tries to break the lock but fails. The fairy comes by again asking what happened, and Pinocchio lies as his nose keeps growing. This only happens here in the whole movie and never again. Strange given this tends to come in mind when bringing up the character. The fairy frees him just this once and reminds him that lying is bad, stay out of trouble if you want to be a real boy. Meanwhile, honest John is hired by a coachman to lure disobedient boys to Pleasure Island. Pinocchio and Jiminy then race back home, but John takes Pine Boy to Pleasure Island, where disobedient boys can do whatever they want with no consequences. Or so they think. This sequence is surrealist, especially when seeing a character like Pinocchio smoke cigars, drink beer, and utter words like jackass, and from a company like Disney no less. Jiminy then stumbles upon the island, only to find out that the boys turned into donkeys to work in the salt mines. Pinocchio soon finds out when seeing a friend transform in a pretty messed up scene with Pinocchio growing a donkey tail and ears. Pinocchio and Jiminy escape and head home, but Geppetto's not there. Where the fairy comes back again as a dove to hand a letter stating that Geppetto got swallowed by a giant whale named Monstro looking for him. They set course and dive into the ocean, and Geppetto must have some high quality wood, as I'm amazed Pine Boy's still holding together underwater. For 1940, the water effects look amazing, and helps make the scene stand out even more. The two get swallowed by Monstro and reunite with Geppetto, Figaro, and the fish. They figure out a way to escape by making the whale sneeze, and cut to an exciting escape climax as Pinocchio selflessly saves Geppetto, seemingly sacrificing himself, and because of his actions, Pinocchio finally becomes a real boy and Jiminy gets a gold badge certifying him as an official conscience. That was quite full on, wasn't it? And I can safely say without hesitation that this was a step up from Snow White in pretty much everything. The animation looks great, the characters look even better, mostly. The scenery is wonderful, top-notch musical numbers, mind-blowing effects for its time, and just better storytelling and pacing in general. It's also worth checking out for how nuts this movie could get at times. You would never see Disney pull those off today. And despite taking a good minute for the adventure to really begin, and the plot conveniences scattered throughout, I'd argue this is the best take on the tale, followed closely by the recent Guillermo del Toro adaptation. And you know what? The recent live-action remake was pretty good too! Fantasia, the most drastically different film of the entire animated canon, putting aside its follow-up and a package film era. and is also the longest film at 2 hours and 6 minutes. Originally made to help boost popularity for Mickey Mouse, it's a compilation of animated segments set to classical music, hosted by James Taylor, spoiling every segment before they begin, and music conducted by Leopold Stokowski and the Philadelphia Orchestra. The first sequence is Toccata and Fugue in D minor, beginning with the orchestra slowly transitioning into abstract art. A great start to the film, and it's nice to hear that composition in something that isn't about Dracula for once. The Nutcracker Suite. Multiple animations, each from different sections of the suite, whether about fairies, fish, flowers, mushrooms, and leaves. All well animated and really satisfying when the on-screen movements sync up with the music. The Sorcerer's Apprentice, possibly the best segment of the lot, with Mickey Mouse as an apprentice of the wizard Yen Sid bringing a broom to life to do his bidding, but things get out of hand, teaching us that the easy way is never the way to go, and for the love of God, don't let Mickey Mouse study magic. Rides of Spring, showcasing a history of the origins of Earth, from the first living organisms forming to the extinction of the dinosaurs. While I didn't find the music as memorable, the animation certainly was, and the dinosaurs helped give a decent sense of intimidation and dread. We then take a break and meet the quote-unquote soundtrack, and I gotta say that was a pretty cute segment. The Pastoral Symphony set in a mythical Greco-Roman world with centaurs, cupids, and flying horses, alongside the god of wine Bacchus, all celebrating a festival honoring him. But is interrupted by Zeus creating a storm with Vulcan forging lightning bolts to throw at the attendees. Quite a contrast from the Zeus and Hercules, huh? But things at least calm down. Dance of the Hours, a sequence of ostriches, hippos, elephants, and crocodiles representing times of the day. I definitely had some fun here, even though it felt a bit like a David Lynch movie at points. And finally, the Night on Bull Mountain sequence. One of the most striking and terrifying moments in animation history. Featuring the devil Shurnabog awaking at midnight to summon spirits and souls from their graves to Bald Mountain, even seeing what looks to be hell. I have a first in my animation degree, and yet I still don't know how they made those ghost effects back then. Just like Pleasure Island, you would never see Disney attempt something nearly as close nowadays. The spirits dance through the night until an angel's spell drives Shurnabog back into the dark as night becomes dawn, transitioning into Ave Maria with a line of robed monks holding lighted torches throughout the forest into the ruins of a cathedral. An excellent conclusion to an excellent experience of a film. This film will not be for everyone given its more visual concert approach, but in terms of that, yeah, it's one of the greatest movies ever made. While some segments might not be as strong or memorable as others, this film should be watched by everyone. It's worth it for the Sorcerer's Apprentice and Knights on Bald Mountain alone. And with that, I can see why many coin it as Walt Disney's masterpiece, and to this day, it still is. Dumbo! In contrast to Fantasia being the longest Disney movie, this is one of the shortest ones at just over an hour, and I remember watching this a lot as a kid for its runtime alone. And thankfully the movie's pretty great too. We begin with storks delivering babies to various expecting mothers with a nice accompanying song, yet a mother elephant at the circus named Mrs. Jumbo still has yet to wait. The circus then heads around the country with the stork finally giving Mrs. Jumbo her baby elephant, Jumbo Jr., or how the elephant peers call him, Dumbo, who happens to have big ears only his mother could love. And because of them, he gets ridiculed by both elephant peers and circus visitors, leading Mrs. Jumbo to go wild defending him, shortly being put in solitary confinement. Still more civilized than a Karen. It makes you feel really sorry for Dumbo as he didn't really do anything wrong here. We then meet a mouse called Timothy who befriends Dumbo and is instantly a better Jiminy Cricket. He gets an idea to make Dumbo a star, convinces the ringmaster in his sleep, and once the big day arrives, surprise surprise, everything goes horribly wrong, with the elephants exiling poor Dumbo and his pub with the clowns. When did this movie suddenly turn into Joker for kids? Later on, he gets to visit his mother in one of the most gut-wrenching moments in a Disney movie. Mrs. Jumbo rocking Dumbo on her trunk was already sad enough, but when you combine that with the song playing throughout and the other animal mothers with their children, that's a whole other kick in the crotch of emotions. And a minute later, alcohol poisoning, which leads to the infamous pink elephant sequence. And does it contribute anything to the plot whatsoever? No. But is it still a cool and vibrant sequence to look at even after 82 years? Oh, absolutely. And afterwards, Dumbo and Tim wake up on a tall tree and then— oh shoot, the crows! Okay, the crows are painful reminders of society's prejudice back in the day. I'm appalled the writers back then thought this is okay. They were wrong then and certainly wrong today. I think I'm gonna move on before the internet suddenly decides to cancel me. Convinced that Dumbo flew up the tree, they then get a feather from the aforementioned outdated stereotypes to test the theory. And what do you know, he can fly. We finally get to the climax with another clown act, and this time he successfully flies, even without the feather, entertaining the public and simultaneously getting payback against the clowns and other elephants.
At least he didn't kill the ringmaster.
Dumbo then becomes a smash hit and is finally reunited with his mother. What a satisfying ending. Though it was shorter than the others, you could argue that the shorter runtimes benefit Disney's films more compared to Snow White and even Pinocchio to some degree. And Dumbo has a lot of charm, heart, fun, and delight, so the film is still a classic, albeit hurt by the test of time. And finally, Bambi. Don't ask why that's Raisy's pet name for Ban, I'm convinced the two got close. But for some reason the DVD I have is enhanced by THX. Like, why does this film from 1942 have the same sound enhancements as Star Wars? Well, only one way to find out. In this film, we explore a newborn deer named Who Else Bambi, discover and learn about the forest alongside his mother and friends Thumper and Flower. This film is more observational to begin with, so those that expect some sort of storytelling will likely give this part of the film the death penalty. Yet despite that, we get nice sequences of the fawn exploring the world, learning about the Great Prince, Dangers of Man, and changing seasons, all with stunning animation. But soon after a charming ice skating sequence, comes one of the most shocking and chilling moments in cinema history. Oh, so that's why this DVD is enhanced by THX. The fact that parents still dread showing this scene to their kids says enough. The emotional whiplash with the death of Bambi's mother is powerful, and to this day is one of the greatest death scenes of all time. The fact we don't even see the carcass lets our brains do the dirty work, and left all alone, the Great Prince takes Bambi under his care. And speaking of emotional whiplash, spring is here, where all the birds are flexing their love as I am flexing my Xbox games right now. We also have Bambi, Thumper, and Flower grown up, which is a decent shake-up looking back, and we now got some sort of story going forward, as the trio are warned by the owl that they will fall in love, or how he phrases it, Twitter-pated. Which can only mean... I think you can figure out the rest from here. Unfortunately, they all fall in love, with Bambi meeting up with Pauline from his childhood, but for no reason another deer challenges Bambi in a well-choreographed and animated fight sequence and gets the girl, transitioning into a sequence that, unlike a certain film later on, thankfully isn't longer than Persona 5. However, Bambi and the prince soon discover that man is nearby, leading to its climax, and if you thought Bambi's mother getting shot was the most tense bit, oh, it gets worse from here, sunshine. As a fire then spreads into the forest, forcing everyone to escape whilst avoiding hunters. They all take refuge on a riverbank and watch in horror as the fire spreads throughout the forest. Only you can prevent forest fires. The next spring, Pauline gives birth to twins as Bambi becomes the new Great Prince of the Forest. And that ending shot still gives me chills. It's strange how Bambi of all films is one of the coziest and tensest in the Disney library. While not as tense as Pleasure Island, Rides of Spring, or Nights on Bull Mountain, you'd at least expect it with this one. But works in the grand scheme of it being a coming-of-age story. But yeah, in terms of art direction and animation, Disney has gone all out with Bambi and ended this era with a bang with great compelling characters, tight pacing and storytelling, majestic art direction again, and even mesmerizing music and sound design you just don't hear in movies anymore. But you may feel disappointed about how the impact of Bambi's mother getting shot and Shadow over here got swept under the rug, but then again you could always watch Bambi 2 for that, I guess. I heard it's not too terrible. So with that, this is probably the best film in the lot, putting aside Fantasia. Man, they really kept topping themselves with this era, haven't they? With Snow White and even Pinocchio in some areas, you could kinda tell that they were the first of their kind. Yet with Dumbo and Bambi, you could see their storytelling tricks become that more finesse thanks to their tighter runtimes, and show that practice is perfect when starting out with these things. And even then, the best film of this era wasn't really a movie at all. But when at worst, I still thought they were great, and it truly shows how high quality these films really were. And its future looks to be even brighter. Scratch that. And if I had to rank all films covered here for worst to best, it would be Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Pinocchio, Dumbo, Bambi, Fantasia, and the Academy Award review of Walt Disney cartoons. Have you seen any of these films, and if you did, what do you think of them? Let me know down below, and with that, thanks for watching.